Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another review. And this time we're going to be tackling one of the most famous Batman stories of all time, The Long Halloween, which is by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. One of the interesting things about this is that Jeph Loeb always demands that when he works with Tim Sale that they be credited together as storytellers, because that's what a comic book is, and that the art doesn't work without the writing, and the writing doesn't work without the art, and it's a very complimentary process. And so you notice a lot that people will just credit will just credit Jeph Loeb with how good the story is, but a lot of his good ideas and a lot of the reasons certain scenes and a lot of things work is because of Tim Sale, and so they are very much a perfect pair. So Tim Sale and Jeph Loeb have worked together quite a number of times, and they've only got three famous Batman works. We've got The Long Halloween, we've got Dark Victory, and we have Haunted Knight. And Haunted Knight's actually a collection of three stories, three one-shots they did, and those one-shots are actually further broken down into three-issue minis, and or at least they were supposed to be, and that's a whole different discussion that we could have when we eventually review Haunted Knight. And this is arguably the most famous. I hear a lot of people say that they think their favorite is still Haunted Knight, but this is still the most famous. After this came out in trade back in, 97, I think, back in 1997 when it came out in trade, it's been on the top 10 selling list perpetually. If you look at the top 10 selling graphic novels, you get stuff like Watchmen, you get stuff like Dark Knight Returns, and then you always get stuff like Year One and The Long Halloween. Ever since The Long Halloween's been released, it's always been on the top 10. It's one of the most famous Batman stories, and most people, if not everyone, at least puts it in their top 10. You'd be hard-pressed to find a person that doesn't love this story, and rightfully so. It is a great story, and we'll talk about some of the misgivings of it and some of the problems of it down the line, because I had a really interesting experience this reading. So this is a story that I haven't read or even touched in maybe 5 years. I got really big into Batman, and I read a lot of Batman graphic novels at once. And when I did that, The Long Halloween was, I think, my favorite at that point. And I would read it almost monthly. And that just stopped after a few years. And I knew the story so well at a point that I just stopped reading it. And it's been 5 years, and I don't remember much from it anymore, aside from how beautiful it is and that I really liked it. And so I went back to this with a extremely open mind, because Jeph Loeb's a writer that's extremely inconsistent. Jeph Loeb has written some things that are great, like Daredevil Yellow and this, and Haunted Knight, but then he's written stuff that's awful, like his Red Hulk stuff and Batman Hush and just a myriad of other things. So you can never just pick up a Jeph Loeb book and know whether it's going to be good or bad, the way you can tell sometimes with people like Mark Waid or Grant Morrison. These people that have defined their craft, and you always know what kind of quality you're getting when you decide to read them. Jeph Loeb's not like that. Jeph Loeb is impossible to predict. So The Long Halloween started back when Jeph Loeb was still kind of jumping between working in Hollywood, writing for some movies and TV shows, as well as doing comics. And when he was doing comics, he preferred to do the prestige format one-shots that we'd eventually collected into Haunted Knight, and mostly because he didn't have a lot of time. And one day during San Diego Comic-Con at a breakfast meeting, something like that, back before Comic-Con was this huge convention center gathering of fans, and it was more so writers and artists just going around, seeing what everyone's up to, and deciding to work on pairs. Jeph Loeb essentially going around trying to find an artist like all weekend to help him work on a project, and that's what the process was back in the day. And he even says, even now, that he really misses that atmosphere. So at that point, around that time, he met Tim Sale, and then he developed a really great friendship and a mentorship with Archie Goodwin, which was one of the bad editors at the time, and widely considered one of the best Batman writers out there. He's absolutely great, and if you ever listen to interviews or look him up, or listen to conversations about him through other people, you'll know he's one of the most friendliest guys on the planet before he died, and everyone just loved the guy. He was really good at getting writers to do what he wanted and making it seem like it was their idea. And no one ever resented him for that. Everyone just always loved working with him. He was the ultimate nice guy, and he was always the ultimate persuader as well. So Archie Goodwin is having a conversation with Jeph Loeb, and he tells Jeph Loeb that I always liked what you did with gangsters. And Jeph Loeb, at this point, has never written a gangster character. And this is just up to his memory, but as far as I've read before Long Halloween, he's never really written a gangster character. He had no idea how to do that. But it's Archie Goodwin, so you just kind of go with it. And he says, I really want you to do a longer story, because at this point he's just doing those prestige format one-shots. And it's his idea to come up with this thing called the Long Halloween. And Loeb wasn't really sure if he wanted to do it. Tim Sale was open for it, but Loeb was really busy, and he wasn't sure if he would be able to make it work. And eventually they decided on, rather than making it take place in the pages of Detective Comics, they would just make it a monthly maxi series. And Loeb had a lot of confusing motivations to make it work. One of them was that he wanted the book to at least outsell Detective Comics, because at that point, Detective Comics was the book Long Halloween was originally supposed to be in. And so he wanted to push himself and see if he would at least outsell Detective, if not the main Batman title, because that was just in a different league. And when he was writing this, there's a lot of outside influences that actually swayed the way the story was written after the first couple issues. And we'll talk about that as we get deeper into the story. But as it started, Archie Goodwin said that we want you to use the gangster and mafia characters that Miller was utilizing in year one. And Loeb was extremely surprised to see that Miller was okay with letting other people take Carmine Falcone and the whole Falcone family and Sal Maroni and giving them other things to do. And they were really kind of shocked by it. And Loeb just immediately got a spark in his eye and wanted to do this afterwards. And this story is not only designed to cash in on the year one atmosphere and to keep going that way, but also to replace the now out of canon Batman Year 2, which was another story in the pages of Detective Comics that was set in the same vein as Batman Year 1, and that story introduced the Reaper character. And it provided pretty concretely the basis for Batman Mask of the Phantasm. And after that, you got Batman Year 3, which was a prelude to A Lonely Place of Dying and was a heavy influence on Batman Under the Red Hood, as well as the animated series episodes Robin's Reckoning. So Loeb was tapped to replace both of those stories when he created Long Halloween and Dark Victory. And so Loeb was going around trying to figure out what he wanted to do with this, and he had a lot of help and a lot of influences. Miller gave him his okay to use the gangsters. Archie Goodwin gave him the idea to make it kind of like a gritty film noir kind of comic. Mark Waid told him to focus on Harvey Dent and his eventual transformation into Two-Face, which was not handled very much at all before this. And the interesting thing is, now we live in a world where Dark Knight and Beware the Batman and Batman Earth 1 Volume 2, we've seen, and including the Gotham series, we've seen pre-Two-Face Harvey Dent quite a bit at this point. But back then, back in the 90s, it was something that people didn't really think about. So Loeb really ran with that idea, and I get the sense Mark Waid wanted to do something like that as well, and never got a chance to, and he really likes Long Halloween, so I doubt he ever will at this point. So that was the original Inception. That was where the book took off. And then the next biggest influence on this was The Godfather, and we'll talk about that as we go. I've kind of broken up what I want this review to be in a couple of sections, or more than a couple. We're going to talk opening with the Falcone family, then the whole I believe in Gotham City Harvey Dent stuff. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Noir style of it, then Batman's effect on Gotham, and then we'll touch on the Harvey Dent Two-Face stuff and the supervillain stuff at the very end, and just cap it off with sort of the impact of the story by talking about the so many Dark Knight references that are in this. Because the Dark Knight and Batman Begins pulled pretty heavily from this book, not only on this book, but mostly from this book. And Nolan's even gone on record to say that, and he even wrote the foreword to the Absolute Edition of Long Halloween. Nolan's gone on record to say that he would not have made those films if he didn't read this. So let's go ahead and start with the Falcone family, because that's sort of the centerpiece for this. So in most of the Batman comics I've read around the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Sal Maroni is typically like an enforcer, an officer, a captain in Falcone's family. And there is a Maroni family as well, but at least up to this point, he was sort of reinvented and retooled to be like one of the thugs that Falcone uses to go around and collect money. But in this, he's pretty clearly a rival, and they're sort of good rivals. They're essentially two crime families that have mixed and muddled over the years because the world's getting smaller and the ground is falling apart around them. So Falcone has got this very old sense of mafia honor, very Marlon Brando Godfather. And Maroni is more so kind of the reinvention of that. Maroni is more so the contemporary gangster, the guy that's a little bit more crude. He's sort of the main character. He's basically Tony Soprano's nephew from The Sopranos. That's kind of who he is, but a little bit older, and I think that's the best way to describe him. So those two guys don't really see eye to eye, and they've got a very friendly rivalry where Maroni constantly tells him that I'm going to take over, and Falcone's like, sure you will, and they've got a mutual respect for each other in that way, even if Maroni's a little bit more aggressive in it. And Falcone's constantly questioning this for being too old to run the family, and it's very much kind of a cap off to the end of the mafia era in Gotham, and that's something that goes in and out of stories after this. We get a lot of stories where the crime families of Gotham have become a lot smaller, and a supervillain, most notably Black Mask, would want to try and coalesce them into something bigger. But this is where they really broke down, and they really died with Carmine Falcone, who does die at the end of the story and is not used really at all until we get to Batman Eternal years and years later. So Falcone at this point is trying to keep his house in order. You've got his sister coming back, you've got his daughter coming back, you've got his son who doesn't want to be in the family but is a genius and really wants to help out. You've got his sister who doesn't really care for the way Falcone does things, and Falcone even saying that if I ever wind up dead and she's in the room, don't look any further than her. So they don't really trust each other, but Falcone at the same time is really protective of all of them, and he's kind of a loving father figure in the most twisted way possible. And you've got these really interesting, great moments where Falcone sees Batman and Catwoman in his house, and he's not upset that he's being attacked. He's not upset that Batman is naturally trying to attack him or that he's being robbed. He's upset because this is happening on a wedding night in his own home, and he's got this sense of loyalty to house and this off-limits area kind of perspective that is sort of going away at this point. And even Batman is sort of more of a contemporary idea and less suited to take on the gangsters because he keeps breaking down their concepts of loyalty and honor. And Falcone's just getting tired of all that, and he's a really fleshed out character in that way, because he's got this very olden worldview, and there's a lot of olden Italian heritage mixed up in him, and you've even got a little bit of classic film influence dictating the way Falcone does things, because obviously there's the Godfather stuff, but there's even stuff like The Public Enemy, where Falcone and Maroni sort of represent the impacts of the gangster world, not only on a person's psyche, but on their family and on the people that aren't involved and the people that kind of want to help out. And it really shows that Loeb did his homework in trying to make this the most credible gangster noir thing he could. And to go with that, the crime is one thing and the hero is another thing, but the atmosphere has to be just right. And to make the atmosphere right, before you get to the style, you need to have the right setting, and you need to have the right place to convincingly make sure that Falcone can hold on to a sense of honor, and the hero can start to break it down. And that setting here is obviously Gotham City, and we open this book with Bruce saying, "I believe in Gotham City," and this is taken directly from The Godfather, with the opening speech of "I believe in America." That whole opening sequence is basically The Godfather. But we continue this mantra throughout the whole book, and we even bookend it with Gordon saying he believes in Gotham City, and Bruce saying he believes in Harvey Dent. And what we have here is that the system of honor, the system of loyalty just because you're in the family, this idea that there's an obligation to the people that are around you sort of transforms and moves away into something more concrete, where you trust and you believe in the people that earn it, and you go from a very Eastern sense to a very Western sense, because in Eastern philosophy you get the trust saying that if you want someone to become trustworthy, you have to trust them. And in the Western culture, it's reversed, and we say that if someone wants to be considered trustworthy, they have to earn it, and it's never specified how they earn it. It's that trust is bequeathed to them, as opposed to being used to teach them how to trust. And Batman moves the mafia mentality from Eastern to Western, by making people earn his trust, and Gotham City being the oldest monument there, and Gotham City being the most concrete thing, and Gotham City being the one thing you can't live without, it naturally has a level of trust from all the people that live in it, something that Scott Snyder would later tackle a little bit more with Zero Year. And when Bruce says, "I believe in Harvey Dent," a lot of this is run-off example, that he wouldn't believe in Harvey Dent if he didn't pay attention to him, and he wouldn't, and Gordon wouldn't believe in Batman if he didn't pay attention to him. And there's a natural building of a relationship before there's any sense of loyalty, as opposed to the Falcone family, where the sense of loyalty begins, and then the deeds corrupt it. And you get a really good broad sort of two-dimensional overview of the good of people. And Batman isn't really used much as a symbol for justice in this, as much as he's just used as an instrument of change. And his belief in Gotham City after he meets Falcone is sort of the crux of the book, that Bruce Wayne and Batman are working in a world that's fundamentally fueled by the way Falcone does things, and he's using every means possible to shift it away, and fighting and resisting that change is what further breaks down the current status quo, whether it's fighting Batman and Catwoman or trying to take down Harvey Dent, and all of that sort of contributes to the way the criminal empires crumble. And a lot of this is kind of fatalist. A lot of this is kind of the good guy can't make the city better, he can only evolve it. And that's a classic noir thing. And that's where we get to why I love this book so much, is that it's so film noir. I haven't read this in 5 years, and I've become a really big film noir fan since then. And now reading this has got this infectious atmosphere. You've got scenes where Batman's interrogating a guy and the light's on, and the guy starts talking when the light fades, and you get the very clear trope of truth coming out in darkness. And that sort of atmosphere really helps it, and the book being spread out into 13 issues, being called The Long Halloween, makes it feel very Raymond Chandler. Batman's even written a little bit like that. He's got sort of a personality, sort of a quirk to him, that makes him more along the lines of those classic noir characters. And the style is really helped by how long the book is. But this is where we get to the first problem with it, and that's that the monthly format sort of breaks your suspension of disbelief. You have a scene where on New Year's Eve, Harvey Dent links Bruce Wayne to Carmine Falcone. but it's not followed up on until the Valentine's Day, which is only 2 issues later, and that's sort of a natural thing because you have Gordon and Bullock in after the New Year's Eve issue going to meet Bruce Wayne. He's not there. Issue after that, they go and say, okay, he's not there. Let's try and figure something out. And so it reads kind of naturally, but then you think about it, and you think that, okay, so Harvey knows what his next move is in December, and he doesn't act on it until February. And that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And you get this in a couple of other places as well. There's the April Fool's Day issue, where the Riddler is hired by Falcone to try and figure out who Holiday is, who the Holiday Killer is, who the Holiday Killer is. And Loeb designed this issue to give himself a bit of a break because of how much work he was doing, and so the entire issue is basically just kind of a recap story. And when Holiday doesn't kill Riddler out at the end, it's not designed as a symbol of any kind. It's not designed to mean anything. It's just kind of a placeholder issue, and it really feeds into a lot of people's interpretations of Holiday, that Holiday is the ultimate instrument of change, of moving the gangsters to the freaks. He's literally the one killing them off. He's literally the guy that's going out and killing all of these Falcone mobsters and breaking down that empire, but he's leaving the freaks okay. He's letting the freaks live on because that's the next natural progression. And that feeds into why a lot of people think Harvey Dent is Holiday for the entire book, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And that's interesting, but that's not really the way it was conceived. And another issue with this is that April Fool's Day issue, when Riddler isn't killed, it takes Batman 3 issues to follow up on it. Which, granted, is okay when you're reading it, but when you're thinking about the time span, we're talking Batman took 2-3 months to know about the Riddler and not do anything about it. And that really breaks things down when every couple of dialogue exchanges, you're given the month that you're in. And it sort of hurts the piece overall. But that said, we keep going and we talk about the idea that the Holiday is the ultimate mover of the gangsters to the freaks, and you get this pretty broad sense of the Batman's effect on Gotham City, and we open this pretty clearly with Gordon wanting to tell Batman that because of him, crime has increased. He doesn't want to say it, but it's on the tip of his tongue, and Batman calls him on it. And Batman says, yeah, I know, but I need to be here. That's the only way we're going to keep things at bay. And it's kind of a hypocritical thing to do. And Batman's sort of layered with that hypocrisy all the way through, where Batman is the ultimate instrument of change. Batman is the thing that's moving the gangsters to the freaks, and Holiday's doing the same thing, yet Holiday has to be stopped. And of course, from a moral standpoint, that makes sense, but just from an existential place of where Gotham is and to where Gotham is going to be, and both characters sort of acknowledging that, it creates a sense of cognitive dissonance for Batman because he doesn't really know what to do anymore, whether to stop Holiday or not. And there's a lot of questioning of the people that are dying really deserve to die anyway. So what are we arguing for? And you get this great reveal in the book where you learn that Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, was sought out by Carmine Falcone's father after Carmine was shot, and Bruce's father saved him. And Alfred said, Bruce keeps asking, "But what if he didn't? What if my father didn't? He would have spared Gotham all of these years of pain and turmoil if he just let the kid die." And Alfred says that his father would never let someone who needed help not receive it. And Bruce just kind of incorporates that into his worldview, and he says, okay, even if my presence is creating negative consequences, right is still right, and I'm still there to defend it regardless of how much of a hill we're falling off of. And to Batman's credit, it's not entirely him. The seeds of the way Gotham was going were there from the very beginning, and we get stuff like Carmine Falcone being called the Roman. He's got a secret identity. Well, it's not a secret, but he's got a dual identity. And Dent refuses to call him the Roman from the opening of the book because that name gives him too much power. And that idea of taking on a mantle has been there from the beginning. And we get that most clearly symbolized when we run into Solomon Grundy, who's been living under the city the whole time. And Two-Face going there to hide out, almost feeling like home, where he lost part of his face and became a new person, but in a lot of ways, just brought what was already there out even more. And he feels better with Solomon Grundy than he did anywhere else, almost like that's the most natural place to be for him and for the city to go at all. And Solomon Grundy is one of the best villains in this book, incorporated thematically out of any of them, because we get a lot of other characters that don't really need to be there. And again, we'll talk about that when we get near the end here. So the idea of Gotham being transformed by Batman is very nicely parallel with the idea that Gotham was headed this way anyway. And Batman and Holiday just kind of represent the ultimate natural tools that Gotham created Batman, Gotham created Holiday. And there's a little bit of arrogance to them to think that they're the ones pushing it, but at the same time, it's that arrogance that pushes for something better at the same time. So this natural transformation of Gotham into freaks is most perfectly capped off when Harvey becomes Two-Face. And Harvey gets acid thrown at him by Sal Maroni in court, and the acid's given to him by Harvey's aide, who has been working with him throughout the whole book. And it's kind of a nice reveal when you find out that he's not really working with Harvey. And basically what happened here is that when the first issue came out, Loeb was interviewed by a magazine and kind of bombarded with questions of who is Holiday. And the article that Loeb was being interviewed for was called "Who is Holiday?" After just the first issue, there were speculation pieces about who Holiday was. So Loeb, kind of giving into that natural hype, decided to rewrite the whole story, because originally Harvey was supposed to become Two-Face at issue 4, and the rest of the book was supposed to be Batman versus Two-Face with Holiday running around in the background. And it wasn't intended to be a book that was capped off with Harvey Dent. And it shows more now than it ever did before to me, because the Two-Face stuff is not handled very well at all. Two-Face is obsessed with the number 2 because Holiday uses a .22 caliber gun to kill all of his victims, and he's obsessed with that, and he's trying to figure out who this killer is for months at a time, and it just consumes him, and that's how he becomes Two-Face, because of the 2 number 2s. Which is okay, but it's not perfectly thought out. And you get this token scene where Harvey gets a coin from his father, and you don't even meet his father. Harvey says that he went to see his dad, and his dad's still crazy, but he gave him this coin. And it just feels kind of like pandering to get us to Two-Face, as opposed to naturally giving him a psychological reason for being there. Because the idea that he's obsessed with ridding the world of Holiday is a good way to make him Two-Face. The idea that he's obsessed with getting rid of the gangsters. The gangsters are being gotten rid of. And in his trying to stop that, which is sort of hypocritical of him, he becomes a dual identity. And that's good, but it's done so quickly. Harvey has now gone from being a black and white moralist to, or being from a nuanced moralist to a black and white moralist, and you never really get the sense of that. You never really, because Harvey has the speech of, it's just good and bad, it's nothing else, and it doesn't come from a place. It doesn't come anywhere in the book where anyone talks about good and bad in those terms, because the whole book is layered with nuance. The whole book is layered with fatalist storytelling, and the whole book is so noir that the concept of absolute good and evil just doesn't click in your mind until Harvey talks about it. And when he says it, it's not really a through line for the whole book, and that's really where the book is at its weakest. And so Harvey at the end becomes Two-Face, and he kills Carmine Falcone, and then he decides to be taken in because now Holiday has sort of won and lost at the same time, and Gotham is fundamentally altered completely, and Harvey embraces his new role as a freak and a supervillain, and the whole myriad of supervillains join him in that, and then the mob is almost literally dead at this point. And by the end of it, Harvey says that, to kind of cap this off and to give us the reveal of who Holiday is, he says there were 2 Holiday killers. And Harvey became Holiday when he went on a boat to kill one of Falcone's men, who turned out to be Falcone's son, Alberto. And Alberto just turned out to be alive. Because essentially what the idea was is that after Alberto Falcone died, we were supposed to see a body, and it was not supposed to be confirmed that it was his body, but that page was edited out, so we didn't get a body at all. Whether because the original idea was that we'd get a body with no idea whether it was Alberto or not, and we were supposed to interpret whether or not it could be him before the whole story was fundamentally altered. But that whole page was cut. So after that issue came out where Alberto died, everyone said that there's no body, there's no body, there's no body. And everyone was fixated on that. So Alberto turns himself in at the end, turning out that he's actually alive. And he takes credit for being Holiday, and we're left to interpret that as this is his only way of getting attention. And that's indeed what happens, is that Carmine Falcone stops by and talks to his son and says, we'll get you out, And he says, I don't want to be out. You don't even know when my birthday is. You don't know me. I want to help you, and you're not letting me, so now I will take you down. And Falcone's pretty much convinced him that, okay, fine, my son was Holiday this whole time. And then we learn that Harvey was the other Holiday, because he started his crusade with Alberto, that he was going for him, and then after that, all the killings after that were all Harvey Dent. But this is where it gets a little bit muddled and a little bit confusing. So Harvey, throughout this whole book, keeps slipping, and he keeps saying things Alberto's doing our job for us, or Holiday's doing our job for us. Harvey's hair is wet, and he was wearing a cap. So then there was killing on a boat, and so clearly that those two things don't line up. There's evidence all over the place for Harvey being so overly aggressive, and Harvey being okay with mobsters dying, and calling what Holiday does their job. And so Batman eventually suspects Harvey of being Holiday, but he doesn't suspect him soon enough. Now, granted, Harvey wasn't actually a Holiday for the opening of the book. The opening of the book, the first few killings were not Harvey Dent. Harvey only became a killer after the boat incident with Alberto. But before that, Harvey is talking about so many weird, morally gray areas that it's inconceivable that Batman wouldn't at least question Harvey being Holiday from the very beginning. It takes you out thinking that, well, clearly Harvey is not completely right, and Harvey is the most obsessed guy out of all of these men. Why isn't he a natural suspect to begin with? And Batman says this thing of, well, I don't want to believe it because Harvey's my friend, and you don't really buy Harvey being his friend. There's not a lot done with that friendship. And I get the two-dimensional kind of simplistic storytelling you're trying to do because this is a noir, but those two guys don't even have enough screen time together. Bruce Wayne or Batman talk to Harvey Dent maybe 2-3 times in the whole book, so when Bruce is kind of in denial about Harvey, it doesn't really play. And then he just writes off the whole two Holiday killers thing as Harvey fixating on the number 2, and that it was him the whole time. Then at the end of the book, we get a reveal, and we learn that it wasn't Alberto doing the killing. Alberto just took credit for it, and Harvey was the second killer, but the first Holiday was Harvey's wife. And she was trying to get Harvey to a place where he could relax and they could have a family and be together. And so the whole book, we now know that Harvey and his wife were Holiday. And those two things are what created Two-Face, and the fixation on the job and the killings and the method of killing is what created Two-Face. But we're left with those red herrings of Alberto, who isn't really a killer, and we know this all the time. It's not really an interpretive element at that point. And then the other thing is that we get Calendar Man, because Calendar Man's a natural suspect for a killer that goes around killing people on specific holidays. And he says from the beginning that we should be looking for her. So he obviously must have some intuition, knowing that it might be Harvey's wife, and that's never really picked up on. And we were supposed to get that a little bit near the end. There was supposed to be an epilogue where Alberto gets in a jail cell that's right next to Calendar Man, and we would have maybe gotten a conclusion, an explanation for why Calendar Man knows everything there, but we don't. And so we're left with a second red herring in Calendar Man that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because how does he know all this information about who Holiday might be? Where does he get off saying that at the opening of the book it's a her, and then in the middle of the book it's a him and a her, knowing that it's Harvey and his wife, and then at the end saying that it was a him? He knows too much information, and it's never explained. And that's again kind of the biggest issue here, because Harvey's already corrupt. We don't investigate it. There's all these other possible suspects, and we aren't given believable reasons for why they're not followed up on to a greater degree. And the book takes its time well enough, but you really wish you could get more character stuff interspliced into it to make us understand why the story is working the way it is. That said, the idea that Two-Face and Holiday being the same person and kind of catalyzing the mobsters creating the freaks is actually a really good idea, because Carmine has no choice but to use characters like Poison Ivy and Riddler throughout this, and him wanting to fight Holiday, him wanting to kind of stick to where he is, and hurting Harvey Dent and trying to fight all of these outside forces taking away his empire is ultimately what does it the most, because he creates Harvey Dent, and Harvey Dent is the catalyst, or not the catalyst, but Harvey Dent is the final nail in the coffin for the mob, and it all comes out as a natural extension of Carmine wanting to survive, and that stuff's great. And then at the end, we're kind of showing a great two-page spread of all the supervillains in Gotham now. And we keep hinting at it with Catwoman. Now, Catwoman's another element in this book that doesn't really work, because her dialogue with Batman is absolutely fantastic. And they've got this great flirtatious relationship, but it doesn't really serve a story purpose. In Noir, we've got the typical femme fatale character, but there's always this token scene where, after all the flirting's done, the male masculine hero sort of hurts the female femme fatale, and she gives him information that leads to the conclusion of the story. We get this in all Noir, and we have that scene here where Batman's grabbing onto her hand and he's holding it tighter and hurting her, and Catwoman acknowledges that, and then she starts speaking, and then the information she gives Bruce doesn't help at all, and it's just an easy way to let her escape, and she doesn't really serve a story purpose outside of that. She never really answers any of Bruce's questions. She never really concludes what she's doing in the book except just being there. And granted, the dialogue between her and Batman is good, it just doesn't serve any purpose. And then the other supervillains we get here are Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, and Joker. And Scarecrow and Mad Hatter, all they do is Scarecrow quotes nursery rhymes, and Mad Hatter quotes Alice in Wonderland, and that's it. They're given no dimension. They're not adding any sort of depth to the rest of the story. Falcone uses them here and there to do certain things with Bruce's fears, and cashing in on the fact that Bruce wasn't sure what to make of his father after he saved Carmine Falcone. But they're not really developed or interesting characters, and that's a shame, because Mad Hatter and Scarecrow are such, or at least Scarecrow, in my opinion, is a really fascinating character to parallel with Batman and to use here, and he's not used well at all. The Joker's here. He's alright, he's just kind of there because he's the Joker. Not a lot is done with any of them, and that's okay, because it is really a mob story, but the moment you transition, the moment you allow the book to say, okay, now the mobsters are done, and we're here, and we're back to doing supervillains, you gotta give them at least a little bit of a characterization, and if you don't want to give them a characterization, that's okay. If you have to at least give them some sort of purpose. Why are these villains? Are they just there because they're the villains, or is there something to them? And that kind of questioning hurts their presence. So I brought up a good bit of negatives, but I gotta say I still really love this book, and a lot of that's just the atmosphere, a lot of that's the mobster stuff. This is still one of my all-time favorite Batman stories, and you'd be hard-pressed to find better detective Batman stories, even if the detective work here doesn't end up making a whole lot of sense, because at least you get this great character journey that parallels Batman trying to find the killer, and Batman and the killer are sharing so many natural similarities, and both having a natural psychology that breaks each other. And everything with Falcone is absolutely fascinating and really well done, and all the film noir references are great for a person that loves that genre. And to kind of wrap this up, I just want to talk about some of the influence this book has had, because it is an extremely popular graphic novel, and I mentioned Christopher Nolan. The line, I believe, in Harvey Dent comes directly from this book. The Batman, Gordon, Dent working together stuff comes directly from this book. The idea of someone being disguised as a cop to trap the killer, trap a killer is used here. In Dark Knight, we have Gordon in a SWAT team uniform to take out the Joker, and here it's Batman in a SWAT team uniform to take out Holiday, and at that point it's Alberto Falcone. We also have the idea of Harvey Dent being suspected as Batman, because here Gordon thinks that Harvey Dent was Batman for a little while. So we got a lot of references to other material, and like I said before, Nolan says he wouldn't be able to make Batman Begins or Dark Knight without this book. It is a really great book. It's not perfect. It's got issues all over the place, but it's still so well written. It's still got such a great atmosphere. It's absolutely infectious. And reading it in just one sitting, an hour and a half, it's one of the best experiences you have reading a comic. So yeah, overall, I still highly recommend this book. It is still one of my favorite Batman stories, even if it doesn't hold up in my mind the way I thought it did before. It's still worth reading, and not a lot is taken away from it just because the mystery and the character stuff doesn't necessarily come to a head, because at the end of the day, it is a Falcone story, and it's a two-dimensional noir story. And in those aspects, it works brilliantly. So thanks everybody for watching. Let me know what you think of the book in the comments, whether you agree or disagree, your thoughts on The Holiday Killer, and maybe what some of your favorite Batman stories are. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you next time.